Hey folks, welcome back. This is Dr. Horn. I'm going to talk about research opportunities in the environmental science department. So give me a second here to share my screen. Okay. So we kind of talked about in the first week, what kind of research you might be interested in. So I want to touch on that a little bit. This is a cool quote. Research is really a journey. The more questions that you answer, the more questions you have, and that one kind of hit home for me because I've been doing research for a few years and I feel like every time I finish a project, I have more questions than I started with. So it's kind of like doing a puzzle. So if you're interested in any kind of a puzzle, research is a lot like that. Just has to do with maybe um, finding different answers than you thought and definitely different paths than you thought. So what kind of research do undergraduate students do? Generally, you're under a mentor, so a professor that is working on a project, and maybe you're interested in a piece of that project. So you maybe start asking some questions, and that's kind of a hard thing, right? Like, well, what's your question? Well, I don't know. I'm interested in this, and so it's a little bit of a back and forth. You don't have to come out with it right away. So at the end of all of our modules for environmental science, you're going to write up and do a little presentation on what you think you'd like to do research on. So it's not something that you have to get stuck with forever. Don't worry. Believe me, the way I started is not the way I finished. So don't worry. But research doesn't always lead to a definite answer, but just more questions. So the biggest thing that you need to learn how to do is ask questions. And I know that sounds silly, but it's kind of hard to think about what questions to ask, especially when you're put on the spot, right? Learning about the process of how research works, becoming part of that community, how to ask other people questions, and then what does all the research entail? So, sometimes it might seem like you're just going out to count plants, right? Somebody asks you, well, really, you end up doing something else and you collect soil samples and water samples, and then you have to make maps and talk to a bunch of people and maybe you don't like talking to people, but you end up having to anyway. So it's just one of those things to kind of think about. So it's good to ask lots of questions. So when you're trying to figure out what questions to ask, there's not like one path, all right? Everybody is different. Everybody is different in the way they think about things, the way they benefit from research, the kinds of answers they find. So we're not ever looking for like a definite answer, especially in environmental science. It's so complicated and there's so many pieces out there. So every time you think you might have found an answer, somebody else may be looking at it slightly different, and then you have more questions to answer. So it's a constant think tank in a sense. So how would you even ask questions? So becoming part of the scholarly community, that sounds like a special club or something, but what it means is go to some of the student conferences. Like at the end of the semester, there's a conference of all the environmental science students that present their research. Ask them how they got interested in it, talk to a professor, see if they're interested or they have a spot for a helper, like an assistant, right? Everybody's doing cool stuff. You can learn a lot from what other people are asking, right? So maybe they ask a question, you never thought about it that way, and it gives you something else to think about. And then when you read other people's research, and so, reading scientific papers is hard, especially when you first start doing it. It takes forever. You have to reread stuff. There's all kinds of weird words, but you get used to it. You get better at it. It just takes a little bit of time. So these are the different professors currently in environmental science and all the different things that they do. They each have a website, so you can check it out. Dr. Anderson is mostly an ecologist, conservation biology. Dr. Patch does a lot of stuff with sand, sea level rise. Dr. Steele does a lot of stuff with ocean ecology. Dr. Reineman, he had a really cool project where he helped surfers attach a fin to the bottom of their board to measure all the changes in the ocean. Dr. Kafala, who you've already gotten to watch a video on for her documentary, does a ton of stuff with microplastics and soils near the ocean. Dr. Spees is the Goby guy. He does a lot of cool stuff in wetlands. Me, I do microplastic stuff and a little bit of sea level rise stuff. And then Professor Gallipo, was the superintendent for the Channel Islands National Park before he retired. So he's like a walking encyclopedia of cool park stuff. Here's a little video that we can watch. Okay, so given that and all the fun stuff that's out there, this is just a short list to help you kind of figure out your research interests and help you with that final project. So, um, if you want to think about this, pause this lecture and maybe help write down some of these answers. This will help you with your assignment, about what you want to do, after your reflection journal last week. What kinds of things are you interested in? What might and take you to that field, right? Like what kind of stuff do you like to do on your own? What kind of classes have you taken that are really interesting? What kind of problems are you interested in solving? Things around your own neighborhood, in your own life. Does that apply to environmental science? And then maybe if you haven't chosen a major yet, does it apply to a different major, right? Do you need to kind of look into that and see what's out there? So, what kinds of things are you interested in? I want you to really think about this, right? So, how many more lives can you touch as a college educated researcher? What kind of job will it take that requires that college education? What insights can you gain? What kinds of things can you change? What might be different about your life down the road when you become a researcher? And what kind of good can you do for the world when you create new things? So maybe think about those things when you're writing your stuff down. All right, and so that's the short lecture for today. And